Thank you, Julia, for having us here. From a personal perspective, I just wanted to say how excited I am to be here at an event like this, because fashion often gets kind of shrugged off as superficial and just about shopping and fashion shows. And one of the things that we're striving for on a local scene is to kind of explore how fashion is much more than that, how fashion permeates everything we're doing, including technology and science and all sorts of aspects of our lives. So if you guys can start off just by introducing yourselves and giving us an idea of what you're focusing on in your work.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. You have a video, do you go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
So my name is Angela Cravens-Chander. I'm a writer, and I started my career in print. In 2003, I was executive editor for Trace magazine. And it's strange to think of now, but I didn't tweet. I argued that we didn't have time to blog. We were entirely a print publication focused on fashion, art, and culture, and particularly global youth culture. At that time, we were very much a hacking model for content, or a startup model, in the sense that we were a very small publication. Everyone had to wear a lot of hats. And it was very much a roll your sleeves up, carry trunks of clothes up 4 flights of stairs so Lauryn Hill can wear them in a fabulous photo shoot, and getting it done by any means necessary. I actually found that we talk a lot about the downturn that happened in '08, but for my colleagues in fashion journalism, this really started in the mid-aughts, and I made the shift to advertising at a time when a lot of the publications that I was writing for were folding. It was very interesting to see, as digital became more and more important and technology became more innovative and consumers became empowered with the way that they were able to communicate with brands, the consumers were actually desiring that the brands speak to them and really become content creators for them. So this is work that I did as copy manager at Macy's, working with their private brands. At the same time, I was moonlighting. I created a platform called Arcade 44, which started as a video magazine and really came from a conversation with my co-founder, who was at MTV at the time, and I had been in print publications. So in a way, we were coming from an old model of media and talking about how do we support young emerging designers, how do we support musicians that we really care about. And actually, we can probably click the link and give a sense of what, this is early launch materials for the site, but really illuminating what we saw as what was happening in pop culture globally, and video as the means to communicate. We started as a video magazine, and now we are a video production agency, which also shows the way that these models are all shifting on us. Because we found we had a lot of success with brands coming to us saying, take us into Fashion Week, show us what's happening in Paris, take us backstage at Radio City with Natalia Kills. And our ability to sort of illuminate this world and use the brands as the distribution model to produce this content and then share it with AOL Music or Huffington Post was really powerful. And just one more note I'll share. When we first started telling people about this model in 2010, it was almost impossible to get the tastemakers to sign on for a video magazine because they had no idea what we were talking about. And the first person that took a chance on us was the man of many names, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Sean Combs. He was the first celebrity that let us come behind the scenes with him and shoot him. And it's interesting that he's now launching his own MTV type channel. So he kind of got it. But so that's what I do.
Very cool. So hi, my name is Jill Sherman. I'm CEO and co-founder of Modalist. So a bit about my history. I as well started in publishing. I worked at Vogue magazine for about 5 years, between American Vogue and Italian Vogue. In American Vogue, I worked in the accessories department, sourcing the designers from all over the world. And then for Italian Vogue, I managed the entire shoot from start to finish, including going on the shoots, and worked on a bunch of other publications, including Vanity Fair, Harper's Bazaar, Numero, and did I say Vanity Fair? Vanity Fair. I then, Devil Wears Prada moment, looked at everyone and was like, you guys are crazy. I'm out of here. And packed my bags and just took a chance and moved to Shanghai. So I arrived in Shanghai, moved into a hostel, had no friends, no job, no home, nothing, and just found my way into a startup fashion company. And we took it from, I was the third person, so we took it from conception to manufacturing and opened their first store, and eventually became 6 stores and 40 distribution points. Just after that, I was asked to move to Hong Kong to manage the buying team at Harvey Nichols. So that's really where I learned a lot of that's actually where the genesis of Modalist started. So Harvey Nichols, in case you don't know it, is a bit more like Barney's here in the US. It's a high-end luxury department store. It has many across the world, and despite having a global presence, we really couldn't acquire the brands that we wanted. We just didn't have the purchasing power that we needed to compete against the others around us who had multiple doors. So at that time, I started orchestrating for Harvey Nichols to pull together all of the stores and buy as one global unit and have some purchasing power. And that's what we're doing at Modalist. But backtrack a little bit, after Harvey Nichols, I moved on to Prada, still in Asia Pacific, helped them expand Miu Miu across the region, opened Miu Miu's first stores in China, Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore, and Hawaii, and then moved back to the US to help them expand from 5 to 15 stores here. And it was in the middle of that I decided that I wanted to hone my business skills, got into MIT, and came here. So I met my co-founder here, and we started Modalist. Modalist is a curated wholesale marketplace connecting designers and boutique buyers. And we're aggregating the orders of the buyers to help them either reach minimum order requirements or receive wholesale discounts collectively. So essentially, we're leveling the playing field for the independents, both for independent designers and independent boutiques, and helping them get economies of scale to survive in today's system. So companies like 19th Amendment, we help them as well. So we're a distribution platform for that.
Impressive.
Wonderful.
Both.
Thank you.
I guess what I was hoping we could explore, you guys have worked with some heavy hitters, in the industry, and from a local perspective or a regional perspective, and also being in a city that's really focusing so much on startups, how do we take some of the tools that you're working with and really incorporate them for both, not only for designers who are just starting out, but also for the established designers who are trying to get a grasp of how to use these tools? And I thought we could start off with the whole idea of virtual versus real world, and also virtual and plus real world. Like how do those models work in your experience?
I can start. So for us, I'll just take Modalist as an example. So how designers are currently reaching the market, they're going to trade shows, which are extremely expensive. They average around $6,500 per trade show. Showrooms, also expensive, averages $2,500 per month, plus a 17% commission, or their own personal websites, and they're getting very little traction there. So it's really hard for designers to make it in the real world, right? So what we're doing is taking all of that and putting them online, and digitizing the trade show experience. So it's really this cross between the two worlds. And we're not replacing trade shows, but we're complementary, so that you can actually sell throughout the season, whereas trade shows happen twice a year, and there's no opportunity for you to see the product in between. We enable people to buy more continuously on a consistent basis for reorders, or even for in-season production lines.
Excellent. And what about more from a branding and communications standpoint?
I've seen that the real success and the real innovative models have been the interplay of the virtual and the real world, and also utilizing the structures that are in place and pushing them to a new realm. A year or two ago, Rag & Bone did a really interesting campaign. I believe it was their fall or spring fashion campaign, where they did a beautiful shoot with a model, as they would always do. But then, rather than putting it in magazines and paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to promote it, they put it on the web and encouraged their social media user base to download it and paste it all over their own cities. So as simply as printing it from your normal laser printer at home, they actually had this really great engagement with their audience, and also showed they were a little edgy and rough and tumble and ready to sort of let go of the brand as well. I think that's something that I've seen working with larger brands. It's very scary to think of giving the control to the consumer. But what's happening is the consumers are taking the control anyway, and they're much more adept at having these conversations on social. So if the brand doesn't work with them and doesn't feed the beast in a way, then they are already losing the control. So I think it's interesting when companies like Rag & Bone work with the model and also acknowledge that the consumer is an active consumer now, and they want to be part of the conversation and shape their own experience of the brand.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I think you can probably speak to this better since you worked with Macy's, but I read recently that they tracked with, millions of terabytes of information, what was happening online to see how customers were buying, which items, how it was merchandised there, which items they were gravitating towards, and put that into action in their stores, and actually had an offline increase of 10% sales in store. So using the online experience to really target the customers offline more precisely.
So one of the things, the arguments that can be made that I talk about with students all the time when they're talking about developing their brands is the fact that they don't own the brand, the customer does. Like, because if you do something wrong, they will call you on it immediately. So keeping that in mind, like if the designer or the company has the courage to let go, like you said, and let the customer be a part of that, how does, Rag & Bone has a reputation, so it's a little easier, they have a bigger platform. How do you think newer designers or smaller companies can sort of build that platform? Like, in terms of real life experiences or direct communications, like what kind of, content is the public looking for to that they will engage with? Because there's so much out there, you kind of become numb to a lot of what's going on there.
And what's remarkable is the smaller designers actually have the same tools that the big designers have. And it's pretty amazing that having a fully realized experience across platforms. I think multi-platform is really the key. When you look at a J. Crew, it's a very solid brand presence across multi-platforms, acknowledging that the user has different ways that they desire to interact with the brand. So a small emerging designer has access to that as well, and it's really about consistency, feeding it regularly, dialogue, engaging in dialogue with your consumers, and then of course what's always been moving fashion, having totally amazing images and visuals and logos and all the things that we are seeking out to look at that are part of that presence.
And would you say storytelling is a big part of that, in terms of that communication? Because a lot of people put a lot of money and a lot of splash into like those beautiful images and that kind of thing, but there may not be something people can connect with. So like how, for instance, with the boutiques and the designers, beyond the clothes themselves, they need to create this story around it so that people can, because in the end it's all just clothes. So how do you create those stories, or like which stories kind of resonate, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
I think the editor's eye has been really important with this, and it's the word's used a lot, but curation, because there's so much, there is really a desire to have a curated experience, and that's where the storytelling element comes in, where I know that if I subscribe to this Instagram stream, there's going to be something to look at that does tell this ongoing story. For instance, J. Crew will shoot in Bali, and that's a story that I want to hear about. And there'll be a story about the manufacturer of a heel. That's really interesting. So it's a deeper engagement with the brand, and the curation comes into, for instance, you walk into a shop, and if you know that you trust those shop owners, you can walk in and discover something. The sense of discovery. I think now there's subscribing to certain emails to get that discovery to come to you, and also when you're on someone's Instagram feed, it's you're asking that brand to curate the experience for you and to give you the story that you're interested in.
So I think it's really important for brands to define their story and be clear about who they are, especially because before you had, traditionally back in time before social media, you had specific editors that really controlled how they were how the brand reached the public, right? You had 5 or 10 key people who expressed this brand and wrote about their shows and the collections and helped them reach the market. Now you have everyone, the whole world is able to give some input and react to how a collection is received by them personally and by the consumer. And so I think it's I think it's very important for brands, as you said earlier, be extremely consistent and clear about who they are and the message that they want to say and give to the public, and be consistent with it throughout time, so that when people are reacting to their collections, they're reacting in a more uniform manner, so it's more controllable.
And when you're telling those stories and building those platforms, like one of the things I tell some my students or new designers is to think small, not big, in terms of audiences, like to really create a very strong pocket of people. Because I know I go to a city and I find all these little pockets of cool things happening in fashion and other industries. And they become these little communities, you know. And when you go to a city, you want to find out what's specific, because the big brands tend to be generic after a while. You see them everywhere. The stores are the same in every city, and that's great for one particular part of the business. But I mean, you work with boutiques, and you work with a lot of different brands. So how do you feel about that in terms of thinking in terms of these smaller pockets rather than trying to reach everybody at once?
Yeah, I think you have to do what you do the best that you can do and target your specific demographic awesomely before you can move on. I mean, even like as a buyer at Harvey Nichols, we would look to see which little stores they were sold at beforehand, which gave it credibility and marketability in the ecosystem. It doesn't make sense to go and place a huge order for a brand that doesn't have any traction or any confidence in being actually able to produce those products. So focusing on your niche and in your area and working your way out, I think is absolutely the way to go.
I would agree, and even your point about being true to your voice. It's so interesting because those pockets used to be, there was a West Coast style, or you go to London and see what's happening in London. Now the consumer is able to engage and see what's happening everywhere. So the pockets are different. What motivates people are different. It's not just geographical. And in real time, we're all seeing everything that's happening across the globe. So that's been very interesting as well.
Yeah, because I think from the customer's perspective, there's always that attraction to the big names that you know, but I think more and more of the consumer is looking for something special, something unique to at least fold into that mix of what their personal
Yeah, I mean, the big names help to draw in customer attention, right? So for any store, you're trying your best to have a couple of big names that bring in the customers, and then inevitably they buy something else that they can afford. It worked the same with Prada. I mean, there's the fashion shows, which are glitzy and great and awesome products, and people are drawn into the store for the window that's featuring the fashion show, but inevitably the products that are bought are the commercial pieces. Fashion show makes up about 5 to 10% of the actual items sold in the store, and the rest is what's consistent from year after year. It's really telling, I mean, that is really the brand.
So innovation is a buzzword that's just, overused and misused a lot. It's hard, in the abstract, it's very cool, to think, oh, I'm innovating, I'm disrupting. But can you speak to how that's really relevant in a real world situation, like when you're actually running a business, trying to pay the bills, and like how does innovation play into that? Because some things, I know with some more established designers, they may be really kind of scared off by the word innovation, because they're like, I don't have time to do one more thing. I need to make the rent. I need to make all these things. So how does that word play into real world business?
I'm really interested in the startup model as a true engine for innovation, especially in fashion. And what I've seen in Boston is a great network of support and the opportunity for the right kinds of collaboration. Something that I've been really interested in and really excited by is the interplay of fashion and tech, like we're talking about now, not just having the creative eye, but having the programmer on board. And that's the kind of dialogue that I'm seeing much more so in Boston than even in New York or some of the other areas where I've been reporting. Paris has been very slow for this angle. But in a place like Boston where there's real support for the startup economy, there's certain foundations in place that can help young entrepreneurs, as Jill's company was part of Mass Challenge, which has been very exciting, and also companies like Bow and Drape, which are innovating what was once a mid-century dressmaker model and using digital platforms to provide sustainable fashion. To me, innovation going forward is going to be really about more green practices and hopefully some true innovation with just design and aesthetics, because fashion has a way of looking back quite often. You hear a designer say, well, I was really into the 70s this season. And there's such a great opportunity with the availability of tech and the communication that's happening across the globe in real time to see what the real next century model is going to be.
So I've been really interested in two mammoth companies, H&M and Zara, both awesomely interesting companies to look at. So if you look at H&M, like how does a company like that stay innovative? And what they've done is partnered with major designers, and that's awesome. So so you can look at the major brands, look at Prada and Tom Ford. They're innovating with their fabrics, right? It's taking these very beautiful, refined fabrics and putting some technology in it to make it more interesting, so that you're buying a specific design based on the fabrics. But that's not affordable for most people. So if you look at H&M, they're partnering with these designers who then bring the actual design element without having the fabrics, make it much more affordable. Super interesting. And then you look at Zara, who's totally thrown the whole industry for a loop and created this new business model of fast fashion. So smaller batch orders going to stores, which means a customer needs to buy that product right then and there or they're not going to get it. Rapid inventory turns, and new products arriving all the time. So that's what I looked at as inspiration when I was building my company. So it's very, very difficult for these smaller stores to compete with something like Zara, because they're manufacturing it all themselves. So and I'm sorry to keep bringing Modalist as an example, but what we're really trying to do is even the playing field so that these smaller boutiques gain access to brands that are much more agile, because they're producing it themselves, they're producing it in their locale. So creating manufacturing here in the US or wherever their locale is, and bringing products to market more often. So that's the sort of innovation, I think, looking to see what the big guys are doing and bringing it down to a level that can be distributed amongst the smaller people.
I just read this piece on the rewiring of Boston Fashion, not Boston Fashion Week, of Fashion Weeks in general. And it spoke to the seasons and how technology, social media has transformed the fashion industry and made it something that is immediately accessible, where before it was very exclusive and you couldn't see things until the editors chose to show them to you. And today the model for a fashion week or any kind of celebration of fashion to promote fashion should really be on the customer's terms and on the customer's timetable. So not having a fashion show 3 months before, but having it in season so that people can actually shop for those clothes. And I was just wondering how you guys feel about that in terms of actual, day-to-day business as well.
Sure. I think seasonality is going away. The fact that you have to buy winter stuff in summer is ridiculous. Like, we want to buy stuff now that we want to wear it now, right? So that means manufacturing needs to catch up, or that we need to catch up with manufacturing, right? Bring it closer, have it happen more often, because it's ridiculous. It's great for us. We're buying winter when we need it, and it's on 70% off. That's awesome, but it's not great for the brands. Right, it's not great for anyone else. So this idea of seasonality, I think, is starting to go away. And before it was based on manufacturing. You had to create those orders. They would produce them. They were ordered 6 months in advance. They got it to the store, and then that's how it was taking place. And now with manufacturing, you can order small. Especially with technology being able to even distribution, you're able to produce and send more often. So that this idea of seasonality, I think, is going to go away. That's a maybe it's not totally in line with your question about fashion shows. Maybe what it means is that we have fashion shows more often, or we don't actually have these big, huge $50,000, $100,000 fashion shows, and instead it's online. It's in a presence where more people can see it, can be involved, can engage. It's more reactive.
Yeah. And just to use an example from Macy's, Hurricane Sandy hit in one of the biggest fashion weekend shopping of the season, so that was a nightmare. And then it was incredibly warm when coat season should have been kicking off. So these old models, it's not even just the internet that's changing. Our planet is changing, and it's going to be interesting to see the way that fashion reacts to it. And for the consumer, there's such an immediacy now. All these old channels are based on this rarefied world where only a chosen few were able to see the clothes or afford the clothes. And now instead you have anyone with an internet connection seeing the fashion shows streaming in real time and wanting to wear the clothes now, not wanting to wait 6 months for them to show up or a year for the knockoffs that they can afford to show up. And Zara's right there producing it. So it's going to be interesting to see how emerging companies are coming up with a disruptive model for this, and hopefully a more responsible one where there's sustainable practices, there's support for young and emerging designers as part of this as well. Rebecca Minkoff, actually, I think in the spring, as soon as her show was finished, there was an email that went out saying, get this jacket right off the runway. So she probably only had the means to produce one item of that full collection, but she did recognize that the user wanted it immediately and then reached out to her consumer base with the item available for sale.
Sure. I think there's an example there of a company called Moda Operandi. So that was, you could order right off the runway, which was really interesting because basically the buyers are ordering right then and there. So as a consumer, you can tap your order into that order, and it would arrive still 3 months later or 4 months later, but you would get it before the stores got it, so you're like, in fashion before everyone else. You still had to wait 4 months, right? Who wants to wait 4 months? That's a problem that they faced, and now they have a more, immediates that are available. Exactly. So it's interesting that we're not there yet, right? We're all craving to have things here and now. We still have to have production catch up.
Talking about the new designers and everybody, it's kind of again another buzzword to say, oh, we want to support emerging designers. You were definitely doing that through the boutique model, but how? I'm just curious about mentorship and sort of support because I mean you guys have great experience behind you. What kind of mentors have you had? What kind of maybe mentoring experiences have you shared? With upcoming design. I mean, you do it with the designers, but if you could talk a little bit about mentoring and that kind of support system, because I think that's really valuable because a lot of designers are feeling like they're just out there on their own, competing for all this attention and all this.
Mentors are invaluable. If you don't have a mentor in your job, you need to change jobs. I mean, I just think one can't prevail without having a support network around you in general. And I think I've moved from job to job specifically because I saw a mentor who could help me grow as a person and therefore allow me to help someone else down the road. So for our designers, we have about 150 on them online right now on our site, and it's growing every day, so it's hard to mentor them on a one-on-one basis, but we provide them with a ton of guidelines and support, especially while they're first starting. And then it's an open platform, so they can all learn from each other, and they're actually all able to get in touch with each other. So creating networks that'll enable people not only for you to mentor them, but for them to mentor each other, I think is very helpful. So they learn from each other what their minimums are, what the maximums are. They can find out where they're manufacturing. So it becomes not only a place for them to sell, but a place for them to learn from each other.
I like actually what you said about systems in place and guidelines, because I think we live in a world where anything goes. Like you just feel like you have too many choices, and I think having really well-designed systems kind of does help train you almost to do the right things. I hear a lot of people say that, starting off on Etsy, train them to how to run their business because they knew they had to do certain things. And I mean, I think that's really valuable. So,
and for myself, being a former magazine editor, I'm really excited by the ways that magazines are now stepping up into the mentorship role. The CFDA fund that Vogue leads and Anna Wintour is a big part of has been huge to encourage emerging designers, successful, and the next wave of American design. And I was just reading about Vogue India doing this really exciting program where they paired artisans from different regions of India with the storied fashion houses from Burberry, I believe Dior was one of them, in a way to really highlight and support these incredible artisans. So it's interesting how a magazine using that rarefied, the solid branding that they have, can become a platform for those designers.
Yeah, because it used to feel that the industry kind of ate their own, but now all of a sudden it feels like we're realizing the value of nurturing that next generation. So I think, do we have time for a question or two, or? Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. So if we want to open it up to any questions from the audience. questions?
Yes. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about manufacturing, specifically what's going on with manufacturing, maybe just a background in fashion manufacturing, and then also what sort of initiatives are happening to particularly have more high-tech manufacturing perhaps in the United States.
Sure. So the best thing out there, they're awesome, is Makers Row. If you guys don't know of Makers Row, they're putting all the manufacturers online so that anyone can source from them. So be it you're making a T-shirt or you're making a large collection, you can find manufacturers to that. And it's starting from large ones to very, very small ones all over the U.S. So I think they're the largest network of manufacturers online right now. So I don't know if that's helpful as a resource, but maybe that answers your question.
Yeah, also, the majority of fashion manufacturing, where is it done right now?
So for my designers, they're producing in their locale, whether or not it's themselves doing it or a small manufacturer near wherever they're living.
Is there a large initiative to move manufacturing back into the place where people are purchasing their items?
I'd say a small initiative and a really exciting initiative, but absolutely not large initiative.
Sort of like Alabama Chain and kind of model, where it's local and regional, but it is a smaller brand.
And I believe Bow and Drape is doing that as well. The people that actually sew the clothing are here, and they've been doing it they're part of the centuries-old tradition of American dressmaking. It's
kind of the idea of cottage industries, like popping up to support what's happening locally.
Farm to table coming into the clothing model.
Yeah. I mean, the beauty of it being here is you have much more control over how it's going to end up. The hard part is that it's more expensive, so you want to hit a certain threshold so that you get the economies of scale, which is harder to do for smaller designers.
Yeah, and some manufacturers are actually actively looking to nurture new talent. Like Cravata manufacturers just opened up an office here in Massachusetts, and they've been reaching out to the design students and the new designers to kind of make it work for them. And also, like you said, putting systems in place where you have to, reach that bar, in terms of quality, because they know what the buyers want, they know what's going to be kept, that kind of stuff. So.
Great, thanks.
Sure. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question. I'm not sure whether the question how relevant it is to the fashion panel, but I'll ask it anyway.
Try us.
I read an article like 2 weeks ago. It was about the rising phenomenon, the trend of the sharing economy, which is happening in different industries. For example, like Airbnb, the hotels, and also carpooling. People are sharing services and products. So in this fashion industry, I've heard there are people are doing that also. Like friends share clothes, so you can post like the clothes you want to share with the local communities, and then it's kind of like the second-hand thing. So I would like to hear your insights towards this. The trend, not only here in the U.S., but also it's happening in the European countries as well.
Sure.
So.
Rent the Runway
That's
is
a
a
good example.
perfect example, and also Bag, Borrow, and Steal. You can get your dress online for an event and then send it back after and have it at a reduced price. And keep in mind, you want to wear it once, Instagram the heck out of it, move on your way, so it works out. You can have the designer dress.
I mean, there are a bunch of shoppable closets, which is similar to what you're saying. So it's like Bib and Tuck and Material World are both ones where it's almost like a secondhand vintage store online where you can buy from each other. Bib and Tuck actually does it without currency, so you earn credits and you can buy with the credits that you earn from somebody else. In terms, there was one more I had in mind. I can't.
Do you think that could be like a threat to people who manufactured and produce the products from the first hand?
So I haven't seen this here, but there's something called mob shopping in Asia, which is, I think it's been going for electronics more specifically, but it's getting a group of people together to purchase a specific product and getting a better price on it. So that was called mob shopping, and so that's definitely the same. I mean, that's similar to what we're doing to groups of people to get economies of scale.
And that goes across a lot of different things, because, I mean, even with promoting yourself in events and things like that, there is definitely more power in that sharing of resources for people to put on group events and reach broader audiences. So that whole sharing idea, I think, is becoming more popular in all facets of it.
These platforms are also great advertising for the designers, and I've found in retail there's a huge uptick when you do promotions like try on these jeans and get a certain percentage off. It actually is very motivating. So giving people the chance to wear that designer dress that they wouldn't be able to afford otherwise probably could be a motivator for buying the real thing pretty soon.
And I think the Rent the Runway model could be something that major manufacturers who are dealing, and stores, retailers who are dealing with the returns, people who do that anyway, but not officially,
Yeah.
it's technically illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, embracing that kind of concept, I think could be really valuable for them too.
Great, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Hello. So as social media plays huge role in terms of marketing and advertisement for any fashion industry. So let's say if you guys share any of the example where you see the highest level of engagement in terms of Facebook likes or Twitter feed or Pinterest, or one unsuccessful campaign in terms of like any kind of this social media.
This one's for you for sure.
Wait, I'm sorry, what's the question?
The question is one successful campaign, like
Yeah.
one example of maybe
Oh,
from
an
Macy's,
example.
yeah, or one unsuccessful where you guys don't get so many likes, or maybe you don't get like so many Pinterest repins. So how the user engagement works?
Well, I can share from my own experience. I was part of the launch of a new brand called Bar 3 that's at Macy's. It's actually been their most successful launch to date. And we found that the users were going into the dressing room, trying it on. They created their own hashtag before we even had a chance to get on top of it. And it was incredible to see the amount of social engagement and this phenomenon of the dressing room selfie. And it's interesting to see there's some digital companies that are latching onto that selfie model. There's a company called Pose that's using that. So there's countless social media campaigns. I couldn't speak to which ones are truly successful because we don't have the numbers on those. I can see what's been rather engaging as far as getting a lot of hits. But what you're also noticing is that a lot of brands have, if not more than the same number of followers as the magazines. So it's interesting how they're not as dependent on the magazines for their audience. They have their own audience. You see a model like Karlie Kloss, she has more Twitter followers than a lot of the magazines that are featuring her. So it's interesting how brands and people are becoming these platforms that we used to depend on for our viewpoint of fashion or what was happening.
Thank you.
Hi. I kind of have a two-part question. So Jill mentioned Zara as an example of a company that's been innovating, and honestly, that's been the only example that ever comes up when you talk about fashion innovation for the last, I don't know how many years. So the question I have is, why do you think that established brands are so hesitant to try out new things? What are the barriers that are there? And so the second part of the question is, if they do embrace social media as much as the up-and-coming companies, how can they avoid diluting their brands by being more accessible or perceived as being more accessible?
Okay, I think brands are embracing this idea of getting more product to the stores more often. It's just that their big splash campaigns are for the fashion shows, which are the collections arriving in the stores, twice a year, and those are the big splash. But in between, there's small pockets and small collections that are arriving along the way. They're just not as awesome and not talked about all the time. Whereas Zara is kind of a consistency, right? It's always something new and innovative, and it's not like a big splash campaign. So I think they are catching up. It's just not talked about in the same way. Zara is just a very obvious and open one to talk about, but they have to catch up, right? I mean, people have to. These brands need to bring in new products into their stores all the time. It's all about drawing in your customers to come back and be repeat customers, right? Because that's where the bread and butter is at. So you want to make your loyal customers even more loyal to you. The problem is with the reorders, they just don't have the time to get the product to the market more often. So if you have, a highlight bag and it sells out and those customers absolutely want that bag, it takes 3 months for that product to get to that store again. 3 months later, that same customer that wanted to buy that bag, that money is gone and has been used to buy something else. So that's where things need to catch up and become more innovative.
For a lot of companies, it just means completely redesigning their infrastructure because they depend on so many other entities.
Exactly.
And there's a huge generational divide as well. You have to keep in mind that the people at the top of these boards are not digital natives the way that everyone in this room is. And there's a lot that we're talking about today that seems very obvious and natural to us that is not the case if you've been successfully running a company for the past 30, 150 years. And it's just remarkable how much everything has shifted even in 5 years. So when you think about that pace of growth and the pace of change as far as the way that sales are being generated and where consumers are engaging with a brand, it's not always that easy to explain what a hashtag is and what it really means and why your consumer is posting a selfie in the dressing room. So, it seems obvious to us, but it's actually a very new model that's happening, and the ground's still kind of shaking underneath us right now.
I think it also even goes into even the advertising, right? I mean, they're coming out with 2 campaigns a year and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions and millions on them a year. Why not break that up and have more campaigns throughout the year, which draws people in more often? So that needs to change with, I mean, it's very similar to what you said. These are like very almost institutional ways of working that need to be broken down.
It's the whole idea of thinking in small pockets or small
Yeah.
pieces, compartmentalizing the seasons so that it's not this huge investment, and I think it's almost more valuable because you have a better chance at hitting the market, succeeding with something when you have a broader offering. So.
I wanted to follow up on your comment. I wanted to get your feedback on the Vogue spread that featured Google Glass and the commentary that there's still that divide between technology is that weird thing and it's kind of cool every once in a while, but it's still the weird kind of robotic thing and how we can blend that together.
Gosh, what would I say? What would I say in public about that? It's been very interesting to see how slowly some of these story titles are adapting to some of that, and it's true. It is kind of taken from an outsider's viewpoint of this spacey, strange world that's going on. But I do think it's interesting to see the way that fashion has embraced Google Glass. You had Diane von Furstenberg wearing Google Glass at Fashion Week. So in that sense, it's very chic to be tech at the moment, and I wholeheartedly encourage that. I think it's about time. Fashion's getting nerdy. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I think there's also a break, though, too, because there's the fun novelty aspect of that, but then there's all the technology that's literally woven into fashion, whether it comes to the textiles, innovative performance things. It's like, I think it's infiltrating in other ways that we don't realize, too.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name's Bita Diamante. I'm sorry.
We have 4 more minutes, so
Okay.
1 or 2 more questions, and
Okay.
then we got to wrap up. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, I will make this one quick. My name's Bita Diamante. I'm the founder of an online fashion startup focusing on ethnic fashion. So I source from small-scale suppliers and artisans in developing countries. I've been focusing mostly on accessories with my African market, and I would like to now go into clothing. So think Audrey Hepburn or Jackie O with African print.
Very cool. Very Iris Apfel.
Sorry?
Very Iris Apfel.
Yes. And so that really is my passion, and that's something I want to start marketing here in the US. But how do I go about really creating that market when it's not something that's necessarily trendy?
I would look at companies like Suno, who are also using textiles from all over the globe and really tailoring them beautifully. And there's absolutely a market and an area for that. Beautiful textiles and patterns and prints are always going to be part of the fashion world, and also high quality artisanship as far as linens and beadwork and things like that are always going to be a model. It'd be very interesting to see what kind of emerging designers you might collaborate with in order to get your work seen by a larger audience.
And I think there's also a lot of storytelling you can do there. There's so many stories that you can do, whether it be from the local perspective, the global perspective. I think that's very engaging because, I don't know anything about your company and I'm already interested. It's like I want to find out more. So I think that's a big part of it.
Thank you.
All right, so we have time for one more? Yeah? Okay.
Hi. You talked about the big 2 companies like Zara and H&M. And we know that Zara is pushing its products super fast, like snap, 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 and everybody can buy it immediately. And the problem with the actual high fashion is that you have to wait for a Celine code for 4 months. And we also know that like some models of Zara are like incredibly similar to what's on the market right now. For example, you can see like spring 2013 at the showrooms of Zara. And if that's like then Zara just fills the gap of like immediate, like if I wanted that Celine coat and I can't like buy it before 4 months, I can just go and buy that Zara thing. If Zara is filling that gap, like what's like, is that an innovation you think? Or like what's like the place of startups in this? Like they don't have any chance to like compete in this.
Well, there's a
sphere.
backlash against fast fashion. I mean, there is a slow fashion movement, and the idea behind slow fashion is that it's worth the wait. It's the maker movement. You know, it's about craftsmanship, artisans, that kind of thing. So when you start off as a designer, you want to be big and you want to be splashy and you want to make lots of sales. But the other model is to go slow and go small, so that we're talking about impeccable work that you're willing to have. And also, even from a fashion consumer perspective, the fit of something. A lot of people don't know what a couture garment feels like on their body. You know, so once they do, it's worth the wait. So, oh, sorry about that. So,
Turn off the
it
phone.
was the timing. So I think that's kind of a big part that people gloss over. They don't realize that that's a very important part of fashion, and it's powerful. It makes you, it allows you to do fashion on your terms. I mean, create fashion on your terms.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you everyone. So I feel I own JSM Justice. So besides being an entrepreneur and a book author, he himself also fashion designer. His work has been featured in Vogue magazine and other popular magazines. So he's also teaching Museum of Art and also teaching College of Arts and Design in Boston. So thanks everyone. Great work.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.